my goal is still to go to college and start a business and make money. But I just feel it just has reduced some of that stress a little bit, which, helps me out. I do, because I think it's going to expose a lot of the issues in the world today, a lot of the corruption. I think it will expose all of this in the long-term horizon over the years, which will help people open their eyes as they see, as Bitcoin starts to eat the world, essentially. People are going to be like, hey, all of this was a scam. It was all a sham. All of the fiat, it was all just a corruption based system. And I think Bitcoin will open people's eyes to a fair, freedom based system, and it'll help people understand that there is hope. There is hope. They don't have to sit there and say eat the rich. Just put your money in Bitcoin and just be quiet. Then that's the best life right there. We get to have a revolution, a peaceful protest with Bitcoin, and say, get out of here. We're abandoning your system. We're moving to our own fair and just system, which is so exciting, especially for us because we're so young. We have so much time ahead to watch this play out as the world progresses and as years pass.
Welcome back to the Orange Peel Podcast. I'm your host, Nicki, and today is an episode that you are not going to want to skip. I'm telling you, this one is going to be so much fun. I'm chatting with Jack Reger, who is a high school senior that's gone all in on Bitcoin. Now, let me tell you, having a high school student all in on Bitcoin is super rare. I mean, I've only met probably 3. Jack, Dylan, who was on a few episodes ago, and my brother, but that's by force. So we're going to hear his story, what got him fired up and into Bitcoin, and what it means for students like us, for Gen Z like us, maybe in college, graduating high school, wherever you're at in your Bitcoin journey. Let's dive right into it. Jack, thanks so much for being on here today. I am so excited to get to know you. I mean, again, like I mentioned earlier, having a high school senior into Bitcoin is super rare, and it's so special, and really goes to show how far we've come as kind of a community.
I know, and thank you so much for having me on. I love talking with other Bitcoiners. It's great to just be able to open up a little bit and talk with people that are like-minded and get to talk without having to be locked up all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's been my favorite part about starting the podcast as well. It just gives me an opportunity to talk to other people, and with that comes going on spaces. I met Jack actually through a space on the Bitcoin Culture Hub, hosted by Sean. Which is, if you guys don't know the Bitcoin Culture Hub, if you guys don't know the space, definitely go check it out. It's super cool. It's a lot of Gen Z Bitcoiners coming together to just talk Bitcoin and talk what it means for us. So yeah, I mean, Jack and I had a conversation then, and I was just so impressed with everything that he knows. And I was like, I absolutely have to have him on. Again, yeah, thanks for being here. To start things off, do you want to, walk us through your Bitcoin journey? When did you first discover it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. My dad was into Bitcoin from 2020. He was actually an Ethereum miner at first, so he wasn't into Bitcoin right away, but he was into Ethereum. So I was kind of following it along just because my family was into it, and I was just behind him, just watching it happen and all that stuff. And luckily, I got to be into it in early 2020 when it was in the 8,000-9,000s before it ripped to 60,000. And it was crazy watching it go from 0 to 60, not 0, 10,000 to 60,000. That was a great time. So I started investing a little bit after that. And then, now here we are, just all in Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, it's so cool talking to people kind of my age, because it seems like all of us kind of got into it because of our parents. At least everyone I've met so far, it's been, parents are orange pilled, and then it kind of trickles down to the family. So, I mean, when your dad first started talking to you about it, did it make sense to you, or did it take you some time to really get into it?
I understood the basic concept of it. He kept pushing the 21 million, but I didn't really understand it because I didn't know anything about the stock world. I was just like, oh, a cool investment. And I was kind of intrigued. It was going up. It was up 6x that year in 2021. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. But it didn't really start processing for me until about 2024 because I held some MicroStrategy for a while. And I was like, why is the stock ripping so much? And then I started to do my own research. And then I got, started going down the rabbit hole in 2024 when it was consolidating. I was like, oh, we're at 60,000. I remember 4 years ago it was at 60,000, and then it went down to 15,000. I stopped paying attention then. And I really picked it back up when it came back to 60,000. Started doing my own research, and I was like, I kind of wanted to be all in on Bitcoin after that point when I started figuring out what it is and why is this asset increasing in value relative to everything else, you know?
No, I get it. I get it. Have you always kind of been into investing? Because, you mentioned that you held some strategy beforehand, and I think it's really rare to find someone who is, again, our age and, went straight for the TCs before really like getting into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was always in investing. I was in Tesla, MicroStrategy, and then a bunch of other like little things just trying to catch a big rip. Um, and it was all awesome, but MicroStrategy was just went from 10% of my portfolio to 95% of it, and I was like just blown away. I was like, yeah, it all came down to the investing, the MicroStrategy really now strategy opened my eyes. And then, after I went down the rabbit hole, I was like, I kind of want to sell this MicroStrategy just to own the cold storage Bitcoin because it just felt like a safer bet.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I think BTCTCs are so fascinating to me, but nothing really kind of hits the way that just Bitcoin only does. But that's a topic for another time. We haven't really spoken much about the treasury companies on this channel quite yet.
Yep.
That being said, it's really cool to hear your story because mine kind of was a similar way. Like I also was introduced to it, by my parents, my dad especially. But it took me quite some time. They started kind of talking about it in the house in like 2022-ish. And then it wasn't until 2024 that, my parents went full orange pill. And it was just every dinner table conversation, every book that they were reading, every YouTube video that was playing in the house was consistently just Bitcoin related. But, it took me until probably January when I watched What's the Problem by Joe Bryan, which is, incredible video. I've spoken about it a lot on this channel. So if you haven't watched it yet, it's probably time to get to that for anyone listening. Um, yeah, no, it kind of clicked. And then I kept seeing all those things happening around me, like inflation, the price of my coffee was going up, rent was going up. And it was such a quick increase. And after moving to college, it was like, I can't really keep up with this, like my I've like in my fourth semester now, and they've increased my rent 3 times. And wages haven't gone up. It's not like my income has increased or anything. It's quite literally just the fact that they're trying to squeeze more money out and everything. So where I'm trying to take this is, as a high school student, what were some of the realities about money that you were noticing around you? Maybe like things your classmates were saying, things about like future jobs, or just like what were you seeing that made you think that this system might not be built for us?
I don't know. I kind of started to study a little bit more about like how fiat currencies worked. And I started to look like, hey, things are getting more expensive. Why is this happening? And then I got brought down the rabbit hole of what fiat currencies are, a currency not really backed by anything. Like after 1971, our dollar is essentially now kind of worthless and becoming worthless every single day, more and more and more. And I was like, why is this happening? And it's just because they're debasing the dollar so hard. And it seems like it's only increasing at an increasing rate as of today. And my friends like, hey, like our groceries are getting more expensive. My parents talk about our grocery bill went from $100 a week to $150 a week in the last however many years. And it's just, wow, this is because the government is literally printing our money away and devaluing our currency, which is just kind of opened my eyes a ton. And then when you get down to the basics of it, no fiat currency ever has survived and will ever survive because it's fiat, So it's awesome to have Bitcoin now with a system that has a fixed supply of 21 million and it can't be debased. Like something I thought was really cool is the Roman Empire. I always heard about like they were the greatest empire in the whole world. They lasted for hundreds of years and then they eventually collapsed. And people say my teachers tell me the reason that Roman Empire collapsed was because their armies, they didn't have their armies anymore to protect their city walls. And it's not just that they didn't have an army, it's because their government was printing away their currency and they couldn't pay their soldiers anymore. That's kind of how the story goes. And I believe that that same story is going to happen with the US dollar. It's just, and we're going to be left with hard assets, gold, real estate, Bitcoin, and other hard assets.
Yeah, definitely. And if you think about it, yes, this is a historical phenomenon, but we also see it happen in today's day and age as well. Think about Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela, all of the debasement that's going on, the currency debasement it's something that's actually a threat to stronger currencies like the USD, the Australian dollar, even the euro. And I think that when we live in these countries, we have this mindset of this isn't going to affect us. We're never going to have to deal with hyperinflation, our country going bankrupt. But that's not the case. And every fiat currency is eventually going to end up with the same fate. And, that is hyperinflation. That is the country is going to default on their loans. So I think it's really cool to come of age at a time where we have Bitcoin, where we have probably the hardest, most sound form of money that is physically possible in this world. Um, yeah, now that we've got, kind of your story and the why, behind your Bitcoin, let's talk about what you did with Bitcoin. This is mostly for students who might be listening to this right now or parents who have kids that they want to get started with Bitcoin. What was your very first move with Bitcoin? Did you kind of just buy it off an exchange first thing, or were you like doing a bunch of research and you figured out which wallet, which exchange, like what is the best scenario, and then you went into it, or was it kind of just like a one-off kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I told you before the podcast started, I just turned 18, so I didn't have a way to buy Bitcoin. So the only way I could do it is I had a E-Trade custodial account, so I could buy stocks, buy and trade stocks underneath like my parents' name. You know what I mean? So that's where I would buy and trade stocks, and then I would have to Venmo my dad. I literally have to Venmo my dad or bring him down cash and be like, "Hey, can you put some money in my account? Can you help me?" Be able to buy some stocks, buy some Bitcoin. And then I held a little bit of IBIT and all this stuff. And then as I just turned 18, my dad helped me set up a cold card. Don't worry, I wrote down my 24 words in my own room without him being there. He helped me set it up though. So it was really my parents that kind of got me able to start with this because I legally couldn't start with it, unfortunately. So they helped me bring me into the space where I could put it on my own cold card, buy it through E-Trade, and then, hey, can you sell it and send it to me through whatever and send it to my cold card, which was awesome. But now I just buy on Coinbase, and I'm just setting up my Strike account right now and my River account to purchase Bitcoin that way. But right now I'm just using Coinbase. It's just the most convenient for me while I get these other accounts set up. But yeah, that's kind of how it's going right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to talk to, people that started before they were 18 because they were jumping through all these hurdles to kind of get their hands on Bitcoin. My younger brother is 16 right now, and we've got the same issue for him where he doesn't actually hold anything that he's bought. But, next question. So when you were, I assume you were working or you were getting some sort of allowance, what made you want to put that money into Bitcoin as opposed to spending it on, like shoes or going out, like other things that high school students would do?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have a car detailing business, so I go out and clean cars, interior and exterior. I do the full 9 yards of all the intricate car details, and I make pretty good money from that. And I have two options here. I have a few options. I can store the money in fiat currency in dollars, or I can store it in a stock account and invest it in the S&P or invest it in some other form of just an investment. In my eyes, after seeing Bitcoin through the lens that I have now, I don't think it's safe enough in my eyes to keep the money in either fiat or in my E-Trade account in the S&P 500. It's just too risky. I'm a complete self-custody kind of guy. I only want my money to be my own money, and I don't think it's safe enough for me to keep my money in an E-Trade account. It just, in my eyes, is too risky. Why would I leave my money in somewhere that could possibly be confiscated or taken from me? So that's kind of why I just keep it in Bitcoin. I just need somewhere to keep it where it cannot be touched and it just cannot be stopped. It's my money. That's my view on it.
Okay, interesting. It's cool to hear how you view Bitcoin as, kind of a way to self-sovereignty, number one, but also, a little bit of a savings account. Because
Mhm.
one thing that I've noticed, which is, a problem for me, but also a problem for a lot of my friends who are in their like early 20s, is this idea of long-term conviction with their money. A lot of people, they are working and they immediately will take their paycheck and just go out and spend it. It'll be like, oh, I got paid today. I'm going to buy a concert ticket or go in a shopping hall or things like that. So, have you always been someone who's been very long term focused with your money, or is that something that you had to adopt when you were learning about Bitcoin?
I think it actually came along right at the right time where I was kind of it was I was lucky. I never was really I didn't have that much money to spend on my own until I finally started making my own money. And then right at the time when I started making my own money, I became a Bitcoiner. So I guess I've always been long term ever since I've started making money. Just I probably would have spent it if I was making money before I came to Bitcoin, but now that I have Bitcoin, I'm totally long-term focused. I want to save it for my kids, their kids. That's the goal right there. I just completely long-term do not want to leave it. Don't want to spend it on worthless things.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think I had kind of a similar journey as well. I didn't start making my, like, I didn't start really making my own money until about 2023, and this was after I graduated high school. The session in Australia starts in February, so it's like February of 2024 was when I went off to college. So I had like 8 months of just like being at home, and I got a job as a barista at Starbucks. And I'm from Seattle, so this is like Starbucks is super, super big there, probably like bigger than anywhere else in the US. So I was working and it was a lot of fun. And I just remember I didn't get to actually touch or spend any of that money. Because when I, used to get my paychecks, my dad would be like, "Okay, this is going straight into investment." So everything that I had, like I put it into Roth. I maxed out my contribution for that year. Everything else went into, either something like iBit, or it went into Vanguard or things like that. So I guess I've always sort of been long term with my my own income as well. But now that I'm off to college, it's hard to fight the little thoughts that's like, I have this money, why don't I just go get a coffee today? Why don't I just go out with my friends? Or like, oh, my, favorite artist is coming. I just bought tickets to a festival because I was like, I haven't been to a festival yet in Australia. And that set me back like 500 Australian dollars. But it's these little things that are so hard to fight. What I want to ask is, how do you go about doing that? How do you convince yourself that in some scenarios, saving for the long term is so much more important than some sort short term like satisfaction that you get?
Yeah, so I like to price things in sats. I want to go buy a Starbucks drink, and that's going to cost me 10,000 sats. I'm not going to give up my 10,000 sats for a drink that I could maybe buy on Amazon for 2,000 sats. You know what I mean? I do not want to give up any amount of my share of the 21 million Bitcoin. So my goal is to just keep as much of it as I possibly can. I cannot risk, in my eyes, getting rid of any of my sats at any like waste cost. If I'm going to buy a shirt, I'm going to buy it from Temu, you know? I want to buy it from the cheapest possible place to save my sats.
I think that's a really cool way of looking at things because I have not started pricing things in sats, but I think hearing you talk about it, that's something I need to start thinking about. But there's
Mhm.
this graphic that's kind of like ingrained into my memory that prices, the price of a house over the past years in USD versus in Bitcoin. And it's so interesting to see the I guess the graphs kind of like diverge at some point because obviously we know that Bitcoin is a deflationary currency. We know that as long as, the USD is going up, Bitcoin is or going down, Bitcoin is going to go up. What I'm trying to say, it's going to be a better asset, right? So it's really cool to see how adopting a Bitcoin mindset kind of makes it easier and makes you more hopeful for your future. It now, since learning about Bitcoin, I feel like I do have the potential to own a home, to start a family, to have kids, and for my kids to have kids, which is obviously something that I think Gen Z is having a lot of trouble with. We are falling into this trap of financial nihilism. I don't know if you've seen it amongst your peers, but, when I talk to my friends, a lot of them are like, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to own a house. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to have kids or get married because it's like we can't afford it. And put that under like the crippling student debt that so many of us are under. I think that Bitcoin is really something that most Gen Z could benefit from looking into. So like, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, how do you see Bitcoin as a fix to this financial nihilism that we're experiencing?
Well, I mean, as you stated, it's a deflationary money. And the only other ways that people can store their money is, like I said earlier, either in the S&P 500 or something like that that barely outpaces inflation. There's not really any ways to really store your money. You can't keep it in dollars because it's just gonna disintegrate like a melting ice cube. It's gonna fall apart. Like my friends, all their money's in their bank accounts, and they can only purchase 80% of what they could 2 years ago because their currency is getting devalued. But with Bitcoin, I've got a few friends that are starting to look at it and realize, hey, you know what? Maybe I should grab some just in case. Like Satoshi says, I should get some in case it catches on. And it's inflationary. So if I go buy this Starbucks drink right now for, like I said earlier, 10,000 sats, next year or a few years, it might be able to buy me 10 Starbucks drinks instead of just treading water with another sort of investment. Um, yeah, that's my view.
I really do think the currency that we have is so indicative of the mindset that people are going to adopt when it comes to money. So, like, for example, when it comes to wanting to buy like a pair of shoes or something, right? A lot of people, myself included, will be like, I'm just going to buy it now because in this time next year, it might cost, 1.5x of what it costs now.
Yeah,
And
it's gonna
that's
cost
not the case with Bitcoin, right? It's going to cost more in fiat, but it'll cost less in Bitcoin. And I think that that is a really good starting point to try and talk to people our age uh, when it comes to, talking about Bitcoin and talking about how they can adopt this mindset. So you
yeah.
mentioned, some of your friends are Bitcoiners. You mentioned you have these conversations with them. How do those usually play out? Do you see a lot of eagerness to understand and learn what you're talking about early on, or have you had to kind of keep going at it?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think it just depends on the person. Like some of my good friends, when I'm so passionate about it, they really start to understand that, hey, you know what? He's really passionate. And it looks like he's been right. What he's saying is correct. So they start to grasp it. But then obviously you have the other half who are like, okay, what you're talking is just gibberish in my ear. And they don't understand it. They just don't get it. And I think that's kind of understandable because, I'm a high schooler. It's also hard to process for 17-year-old kids to realize the huge scale of fiat, just in general, just currencies, all that stuff. So just a lot of kids don't get it and they don't sometimes they don't want to understand it. But then I've got a few friends that are like, yeah, I guess I have asked in the past. I hold this piece of paper and this $2 bill right here. It's what is it? It's just a piece of paper. And some kids I like to point out like, hey, this is literally just paper and ink. That's it. And it does grasp in some kids' heads, but I guess in some others it's too hard. But the more I push it a little bit and like show different perspectives on it, I think people start to grasp it a little more over time.
Have you had any like success stories? Any of your friends that have been converted because of your efforts?
Yeah, somewhat. So I've got a pal, his name is Carson. He had all of his money in this like stock market, right? And he just wasn't doing too well. And I'm like, hey, why don't you this is back when I was in MicroStrategy. I'm like, you should just sell some of it for MicroStrategy because it's a Bitcoin stock. And he sold 20% of his account, put it in a MicroStrategy at a pretty decent price. And then it turned into like 60% of his account. And he's like, wow, this is actually kind of crazy. So he's now pretty much all Bitcoin. I wouldn't say all Bitcoin, but he is pretty much all Bitcoin. And another success story is my friend Avi, who introduced me to Sean. Actually, I was because he makes his own money. He has his own business too. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing with that money? He's like, I just leave it in a savings account. It does 2% a year. I'm like, you do know that's just ridiculously not it's getting ridiculously outpaced by inflation, right? He's like, I never really thought about it like that. I'm like, hey, well, let me show you this way out. And I just sat and talked to him on the phone for 3 hours about Bitcoin. And he's like, you convinced me. I put $500 in it right now. And yeah, and he put $500 in it a year ago, and he's been putting more and more in it. and he's in college now, and he has more purchasing power in his life, right? Just because he's transformed some of his fiat into Bitcoin, now he's like, hey, I'm starting to get it. I have more purchasing power ability than I did last year, and that's probably my favorite story. But it's just it's fun to watch it happen over time as they're like, hey, I have more money than I did last year. This is really cool. You were right. But yeah, it's pretty sweet.
It is. It's awesome. I mean, you've had more success than I've had with my friends. I've only been able to orange pill maybe one of the people that I've talked to, and my friend Sashi, I had her on for an episode because I wanted to start with that. Thought it'd be cool to talk to someone who really, really didn't know anything about Bitcoin and showcase what that might look like in our generation. But now she's doing good. She set up her Strike account. Bought her first Bitcoin, got her DCA going, and it's been really nice to see her just be more comfortable with the idea that a financial aspect of her future is secure. Of course, Bitcoin provides more purchasing power, as you were saying, but it also provides more security. And I think we're at a time in our lives where a lot of us don't really know what we want out of our futures. We don't really know what we want to do, maybe career wise or family wise, where we want to go, things like that. And it's really great to see that Bitcoin takes care of some of that for us. You might not want to know, you might not know what you want to do as a career, but as long as you have Bitcoin, you have some sort of store of value. You have
I
some way of making money, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one of the things I love about Bitcoin is it helps me relax and say, hey, I've got a base, a foundation that I can sit on. And as my future goes on, I'm not as like terribly stressed as I was before about, hey, I have to find something that's going to help. Like, I need a sustainable this, sustainable that. Now I kind of have found a little bit of that sustainability with Bitcoin, which is just, it really like eases my nerves a little bit. It reduces stress. I'm not freaking out about what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I'm like, hey, I kind of have this foundation that I'm sitting on, which is just Bitcoin, which I feel so secure with versus anything else, really, which I love.
Definitely. And I this might be, a little bit off topic, but you're a high school senior, so you're at a pretty big point in your life where, the decision for what your next year is going to look like might change a lot of things. So, with Bitcoin, have you seen some of your plans kind of changing from what you initially thought you were going to be up to after high school?
I mean, my original thought was always to go to college and start a business and make money. So to answer your question, no, it really hasn't. My goal is still to go to college and start a business and make money. But I just feel it just has reduced some of that stress a little bit, which, helps me out. But yeah, no, my original goal to go to college and start my own business, that's still there. It hasn't changed. But yeah, good question.
That's really great to hear. That is really great to hear because I've spoken a little bit on this channel about how Bitcoin has shifted my plans for my future a little bit. So I'm studying computer science, and the goal for me was always go to college, get the degree, graduate, join some big FANG or Mag 7 company, and be a software engineer. And then I think since adopting Bitcoin, it's kind of opened up my horizons to the idea of like entrepreneurship a little bit, maybe working towards building something because I don't really have to worry now about where those funds are going to come from because as long as I keep taking what I can and putting it into Bitcoin, I know that I have some sort of security for my future. So I think it is a really, really interesting point of view, framing Bitcoin as financial security, as something that allows you to have autonomy in your future. Which is why I wanted to ask that. I think it's really cool trying to talk to other people that's like kind of in the same age range as we are and seeing where they're at with their ideas of their future, seeing where they're at with their plans because Bitcoin really is for everyone and it's for anyone who wants to do anything in their future. It can help you regardless of, how you use it. But let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at kind of broader Gen Z. I'm sure you've noticed our generation is probably very unlike any of the ones that have come before us, and it's it's cool for sure, but it also we care about things that previous generations didn't really care about. If you look at Gen Z from like a social or a political point of view, we care a lot about social justice, we care a lot about fairness and equality, and we care a lot about holding, I think, institutions accountable, which is where you see these phrases like eat the rich or tax the billionaires come from. So, what I want to ask you is, do you think Bitcoin has a place in fixing that sentiment and, really showing people where the problem actually lies?
I do, because I think it's gonna expose a lot of the issues in the world today, a lot of the corruption. I think it will expose all of this in the long term horizon over the years, which will help people open their eyes as they see, as Bitcoin starts to eat the world. Essentially, people are gonna be like, "Hey, all of this was a scam. It was all a sham. All of the fiat, it was all just a corruption based system." And I think Bitcoin will open people's eyes to a fair, freedom based system. And it'll help people understand that there is hope, there is hope. They don't have to sit there and say eat the rich. Just put your money in Bitcoin and just be quiet. Then that's the best life right there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I think a lot of the sentiment, it comes from, again, just having a lot of anger and a lot of confusion as to why we're getting totally screwed over by the system. And we aren't really taught anything in school. I think thinking back to everything that I learned in high school, let alone, about Bitcoin and Wall Street and how to invest, how to trade. We didn't even learn, how to save up for a home, how to pay your taxes, how to ensure that you have a proper emergency fund, a savings fund. Like there was no financial knowledge taught to me and my peers whatsoever. Unless, you wanted to take an elective that was like personal finance or something like that. But it wasn't mandatory. There was no mandatory financial education. And, after coming to college, I took a, principles of finance course expecting it to be personal finance, expecting it to be an insight on how to treat money in the real world as an adult. And it was going straight into corporate finance. And I'm like,
Yeah.
isn't it interesting that they teach us about what CFOs will do before they teach us about what a normal person should do with, saving up for a home, saving up for any emergency. So
Mhm.
we really do have a broken education system when it comes to Bitcoin. Have you like noticed this at all? I mean,
Yes, 100%. Sitting in my classes, I actually took a managing your investments class, and this was before I was into Bitcoin. And like the number one things that my teachers were teaching me was like put your money in the S&P, or put it in like a buy bonds, all this stuff. And after understanding Bitcoin, it's like, wow, everything you were teaching me, all it does is let me tread water. There's no getting ahead in this world, or there's no saving my purchasing power as well. And it's all, also everything that they teach you, it's based on a system that is fiat. It's all a broken system. And everything you learn in school about financial wise, it's just kind of a scam, and after understanding Bitcoin, I just want to go back to those classes and yell at the teachers and be like, hey, you got to start studying Bitcoin, teach your kids Bitcoin, because it's just none of it really gets you out except Bitcoin, which is just crazy.
yeah, it's interesting to see you talk about how you at least had some sort of knowledge taught to you in school because on my side we had nothing, but with you were taught something, and everything you taught was basically wrong, not wrong, but it wasn't built for the world that we're
It's
living in
right in the
today.
fiat world. It's right in the fiat world. Uh-huh.
Exactly. It's not right in the Bitcoin world, and we are rapidly heading towards a world that's going to prioritize Bitcoin and AI and entrepreneurship over working a 9 to 5 corporate job. So I think that there's a lot of adapting to do, not only within the education system, but also just as a generation in itself. We really are sitting at this point where everything we do can make or break our futures in terms of Bitcoin. And it really is going to be a lot easier if the earlier you get into Bitcoin and the quicker that you understand the money that you are trained to want to earn and save in is a melting ice cube. Is
Yep.
inflating faster than you can ever imagine. It's what reported 2 to 3%. It's not 2 to
It's a
3%.
lie. Yeah, no. No, no, no. Uh-huh, no. They
It's
say the M2 money supply, the amount of money goes up 8% in the world. But even if inflation is only 3%, that's not true. They're still printing your dollars at 8% per year, which is just terrible when you think about it. 8% compounding is so destructive for everybody, for the world. And it's just the whole system. It's been 50 years since 1971. It feels like we're getting closer to the end of that, which just leads us to one world.
it's so fascinating to think about the power of compounding, because really this is something that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of yet. I mean, I wasn't aware of it until, my parents started talking about investing and started talking about how important it is to invest and get used to the idea of compounding. And I posted a story on my Instagram account like a few weeks ago where I was asking people if they would rather take $1 million today, Bitcoin today, or a penny that doubles every day for 30 days. And when you take that penny, it'll double 29 times. That gets you to about 5.37 million.
Yep.
That in itself is so crazy because, you have 1 million, you have 8 Bitcoin. They'll take it as like 80K USD. 5.37 million is a lot. And I think that if we just started talking more about the power of compounding, if we just started teaching this in schools, we would see a faster adoption rate of Bitcoin amongst Gen Z and younger adults. So, I
Yep.
mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Something that, we as Bitcoiners view as so fundamental and so simple to explain the world is honestly not a widespread fact at all.
I know. And it's just like we are talking about, 8% compounding money supply is devastating. They're gonna look back, and I think they're gonna look back on this time in history and say, how are people putting up with this? How are they allowing this to happen? And it'll be really cool to look back when we are 50 or 60 and be like, we really were using a currency that was literally getting destroyed in front of our eyes, and we were just okay with it. We were accepting it. We were letting it happen. But now we are so lucky we get to have a revolution, a peaceful protest with Bitcoin and say, get out of here. We're abandoning your system. We're moving to our own fair and just system, which is so exciting, especially for us because we're so young. We have so much time ahead to watch this play out as the world progresses and as years pass.
That's a really, really great note. That's a really great point. And I think that it's a it's a nice segue into wrapping things up here because I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit on, Gen Z and what we could start doing now to work towards building a better future for all of us, a more equal future, whatever we view as better, right? Um, if you kind of had a piece of advice that you could give to anyone who's Gen Z and they were watching this, what would you say?
I think I would specifically like to tell people our age is to really try and look at the money and look at how it's devaluing and look um, closer at ways history has found into preserving value. Look at how gold has been a store of value for thousands of years because it's hard to create. It's easy to. It's pretty great to. It's a great asset to preserve your wealth over time, and just look at these other options and just do your own research on Bitcoin. Just when you hear about people saying do your own research on Bitcoin, don't just ignore it. Just maybe take some time to go listen to some podcasts, watch some videos, read a book on it. Just do your own research, really. That's it. Got to do your own research.
Last question, and this is one that I like to ask everyone that comes onto the show. If you could recommend one, book, resource, podcast, whatever it is, to someone who wants to start learning about Bitcoin today, what would that be?
Two things. I like my favorite book ever is The Bitcoin Standard. It's great. It's a great history lesson that teaches you about currencies, stores of value over time, and then how Bitcoin is a new option in the whole world that presents a new option outside of all these other stores of value that have succeeded in the world. And now, for the first time, we have a digital store of value, which is very cool. So, the Bitcoin Standard is a great book, and Michael Saylor. I love listening to Michael Saylor, hearing his opinions, and he speaks he speaks about it in like a philosophical way, which is I love to think about Bitcoin in like philosophical ways. deeper than just money. It's really deep when you get down the rabbit hole. It's kind of like a religion in a way, which is really cool. But yeah.
It is. It's super cool. Great resources. The Bitcoin Standard that's been talked about on this channel quite a bit. That was the first Bitcoin book that I read as well. So I definitely am fully with you on that. Best place to start, probably. And
Awesome.
Michael Saylor's great, man. I just recently, probably like last month, finally finished watching the Saylor series. And, then I started going into just watching any podcast that I saw that had Michael Saylor as a guest. I
Yep.
think if I'm on YouTube and I see a video and it's got Michael Saylor or Jeff Booth in it,
Yep.
I don't care what channel it is. I don't care what the video is. Sitting down to watch that, because really they are the smartest minds in Bitcoin. And I'm going to link everything that Jack has mentioned into the description, because you guys should definitely check it out. And, if we've come this far along and you're still kind of unsure on Bitcoin, just give the Bitcoin Standard a chance, give Michael Saylor a chance, give What's the Problem a chance. And, then kind of come back and think about it. Maybe some of the things that Jack and I talked about today will make more sense to you. Maybe you'll need to go back to some of my past episodes and revisit them with a new lens. But with that, Jack, thanks so much for coming on today and sharing your story. It was so cool to hear the perspective of someone who's, still in high school and is adopting Bitcoin kind of full
Yeah.
time.
Thank you so much,
So
Nick.
of course, of course. Yeah, I'm definitely going to need to have you on again, if in maybe a few months, in a few years' time, just so I can see, like how far you've come with Bitcoin, because I really do think you've got a very bright future ahead of you, and I'm so excited to see everything
Thank
that
you
you're
very
going to
much.
accomplish. Everyone that's listening to this, if you enjoyed this episode, definitely share it with a friend. Leave a comment, let me know what you liked. If you've got any questions for me or for Jack, I can send them over to him. And Jack, if there's anyone who wants to kind of get in touch with you or start talking about Bitcoin, is there some place that they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at mnpatriot612. mnpatriot612. That's my handle. Shoot me a DM, anything, and I'm happy to chat. Okay?
Nice handle. It sounds like you're really proud of being from Minnesota. I love that. So go drop a hello to him. Other than that, thanks for tuning into the Orange Peel podcast today. I'm your host, Nikki, and I'm going to see you next time. Until then, stay skeptical, stay curious, and stay orange pilled.